The Galactic Empire's massive warship loomed over Earth, its dark silhouette blocking out the stars. It was a vessel of conquest, a symbol of power that had crushed countless civilizations before. Inside, Grand Admiral Vorton stood tall, his golden armor gleaming under the dim blue lights of the command bridge. He gazed at the holographic display of Earth, unimpressed. Another primitive world. Another easy conquest. His communications officer signaled that the connection was established. A moment later, the leaders of Earth appeared on the holoscreen. They sat in a grand chamber, their expressions calm, unreadable. Vorton had seen this before, fear hidden behind false confidence. It would not last. Inhabitants of Earth, Vorton spoke, his deep voice echoing through the transmission. The Galactic Empire extends its hand to you. Surrender now, and you will be allowed to exist under our rule. Resist, and your planet will burn. Choose wisely. A silence followed. Normally, this was when lesser species would break, beg for mercy, swear loyalty, or offer gifts to appease their new masters. But the humans did not. Instead, one of them, a man with sharp eyes and silvered hair, leaned forward slightly. "We are not surrendering," he said, his voice steady. Vorton almost smirked. "Do not be foolish. The Empire has ruled this galaxy for centuries. We have conquered worlds with fleets that could reduce your planet to ashes in hours. You cannot win." "We are not like the others," the human replied. Vorton's smirk faded. Something about the man's tone unsettled him. He had expected resistance, but not this kind of quiet certainty. It was almost as if Earth was not afraid. The human continued, "If you attack us, you will regret it. This is our only warning." A ripple of amusement ran through the officers on the bridge. The idea was absurd. Regret. The Empire had never regretted a conquest in its long history. "You believe you can threaten us?" Vorton asked, his patience wearing thin. "You do not seem to understand the power we wield." "Oh, we understand," the human said. "You have destroyed many, and you expect us to fear you. But fear is not something we rely on. If you come for us, we will not beg. We will not kneel. We will fight, and you will learn what that means." Vorton's jaw tightened. He had never heard such arrogance from an undeveloped species. He turned to his officers and nodded. "Begin the demonstration," he ordered. In orbit, one of the Empire's warships adjusted its trajectory. A bright beam of energy surged down toward a barren island, vaporizing it in an instant. The ground where it once stood boiled into the atmosphere, leaving nothing but an empty, scorched sea. "Your weapons are primitive," Vorton said, turning back to the humans. "Your defenses are weak. You cannot stand against us." But the human leader did not flinch. He did not even look at the display of destruction. Instead, he simply exhaled, as if he had been expecting this all along. "Then you've made your choice," the man said. "I hope you are ready for the consequences." The transmission cut. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then one of Vorton's officers spoke. "Shall I order the invasion, sir?" Vorton hesitated. Something about this felt wrong. The humans should have pleaded, panicked, attempted to negotiate. Instead, they had warned. It was as if they knew something the Empire did not. "Not yet," Vorton said at last. "We will send a fleet. Let us see if their confidence survives the first battle." His officers nodded, but an uneasy feeling settled in his chest. He had crushed many civilizations, but this time, something felt different. He pushed the thought away. Soon, Earth would be under Imperial control. There was no other possibility. Or so he thought. "You said." The Imperial fleet moved into position around Earth, their massive warships forming an unbreakable wall in space. From the bridge of his flagship, Grand Admiral Vorton watched the blue planet below with cold calculation. The humans had refused to surrender. Now, they would witness the true power of the Galactic Empire. "All ships, prepare for orbital bombardment," Vorton commanded. His officers moved swiftly, relaying orders across the fleet. The first strike would cripple Earth's defenses before the ground forces landed. It was a simple, proven strategy, one that had worked countless times before. Yet, as Vorton stared at the planet, something felt off. He had expected distress signals, frantic broadcasts pleading for mercy. Instead, there was nothing. Earth's communications had gone silent. No attempts at negotiation, no desperate threats, just an eerie, waiting stillness. "Sir, enemy ships detected," one of his officers reported. "There, approaching fast." Vorton's eyes narrowed. "How many?" The officer hesitated. "Just one." Silence fell across the bridge. One ship, against an entire Imperial fleet. It had to be a mistake. "Display it," Vorton ordered. A holographic projection appeared before him, showing a lone human vessel speeding toward the fleet. It was unlike any warship Vorton had ever seen, sleek, angular, and smaller than the Empire's destroyers. It carried no visible weapons, no indication of heavy shielding. It should have been nothing more than a nuisance. And yet, it did not slow down. "Open a channel," Vorton commanded. "Let us see if they have come to beg for mercy." The screen flickered, and the face of a human pilot appeared. A woman with sharp eyes and a calm expression. There was no fear in her gaze. If anything, she looked disappointed. "This is Captain Elaine Carter of the UH Revenant," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You were warned." Vorton leaned forward. "One ship. You bring a single vessel against the Empire. Is this meant to be a joke?" Carter didn't answer. Instead, she reached off-screen, pressed something, and the transmission ended. At that moment, the Revenant accelerated. "She's charging at us," an officer shouted. "What are they?" A blinding burst of energy erupted from the Revenant's hull. For a split second, the sensors of every Imperial warship overloaded. Then, chaos. The Revenant moved through the fleet like a ghost, vanishing from sensors and reappearing in unpredictable places. Before Vorton could react, explosions tore through the nearest Imperial battleship. Its shields, designed to withstand planetary assaults, flickered and failed in an instant. The ship broke apart, its wreckage scattering across space. What was that?" Vorton demanded, gripping the edge of his command chair. "No known weapon matches that energy signature," his science officer stammered. "It's impossible." Another Imperial cruiser erupted into flames. The Revenant weaved through the fleet, striking with pinpoint accuracy. It was not fighting a battle. It was dismantling an armada. Vorton's hands clenched into fists. This was not how it was supposed to go. The Empire crushed resistance. The Empire was unstoppable. But Earth had sent one ship, and it was enough to change everything. The bridge of Vorton's flagship was a storm of chaos. Officers shouted over each other, trying to make sense of what was happening. The Imperial fleet, vast, powerful, and undefeated for centuries, was being torn apart by a single human ship. "The Revenant has destroyed 3 more cruisers." A tactical officer cried out. "Our targeting systems can't lock onto it. It's moving too fast." Vorton gritted his teeth. He refused to believe what he was seeing. This wasn't possible. No single vessel, no matter how advanced, could take on the Empire's war machine alone. "Use our heavy cannons," he barked. "I want that ship reduced to dust." The flagship's massive energy batteries turned, locking onto the Revenant's last known position. A barrage of plasma fire filled the void, streaking toward the lone human ship. For a brief moment, Vorton felt a flicker of satisfaction. No ship, no matter how fast, could dodge a storm of fire that dense. Then the Revenant did something that made his blood run cold. It didn't dodge. It disappeared. 1 second, it was there, right in the crosshairs. The next, it was gone. No explosion, no debris, just vanished. The bridge fell silent. Even the officers stopped shouting. "Where did it go?" Vorton demanded. The sensor chief's hands shook as he scanned frantically. I am no, sir. It's not cloaked. It's just gone. The silence lasted only a moment before alarms blared. The Revenant had reappeared, directly behind the Imperial flagship. A transmission came through again. Captain Carter's face appeared on the holoscreen, calm and unshaken. You should have listened, she said. Before Vorton could reply, the Revenant fired. A single precise shot struck the flagship's rear thrusters, cutting power to its engines in an instant. The entire ship lurched violently, throwing officers from their stations. Warning lights flashed red as emergency sirens screamed through the corridors. Shields failing. Someone yelled. We've lost control of our propulsion systems. Another officer shouted. Vorton grabbed the edge of his command chair, fury burning in his veins. How? He growled. How is this happening? The Revenant didn't fire again. It didn't need to. It had crippled the flagship with a single shot, like a predator playing with its prey. Then, to Vorton's horror, the rest of Earth's fleet arrived. Dozens of ships emerged from the darkness, sleek and lethal. They had been waiting, watching. And now, with the Empire's forces in disarray, they struck. The trap had been set from the beginning. Vorton's mind raced. This wasn't just defiance. This was a strategy. The humans hadn't blindly resisted. They had planned for this moment, and they had let the Revenant carve a path through the fleet, just long enough for the rest of their forces to move in. Panic rippled through the Imperial ranks. The battle was no longer an invasion. It was an ambush. For the first time in his long career, Grand Admiral Vorton felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. And deep beneath that, fear. You said. Vorton's hands trembled as he watched the chaos unfold. The Galactic Empire's mighty fleet, ships that had once brought entire civilizations to their knees, was being annihilated. It wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. Earth's fleet had arrived in full force, striking with terrifying precision. Their ships were smaller than Imperial warships, but faster, more agile, and armed with weapons the Empire had never seen before. One by one, Imperial vessels were being crippled or destroyed before they could even mount a counterattack. Sir, we need to retreat, one of his officers shouted. We're losing too many ships. Vorton clenched his jaw. Retreat. The Empire did not retreat. It conquered. It dominated. And yet, every instinct in his body screamed that if they stayed, they would be wiped out. Before he could give the order, the holoscreen flickered again. Captain Carter's face reappeared, her expression unreadable. Grand Admiral, she said, your fleet is finished. Surrender now. Vorton's pride burned like a dying sun. You dare to demand our surrender? He spat. We are the Empire. We. You are nothing but invaders who refuse to listen. Carter cut in. We warned you. We gave you a chance to leave. You didn't take it. Vorton's fists tightened. He could feel the eyes of his officers on him, waiting for his decision. Some of them still believed in victory. Others had already lost hope. A new alarm blared across the bridge. More ships were arriving, dozens of them. But they weren't Imperial reinforcements. They were human. Vorton's stomach twisted as he realized the full scale of the trap. Earth's forces had never been on the defensive. They had let the Empire believe it was in control. Now, the noose was tightening. The Revenant moved through the battlefield like a ghost, striking wherever it pleased. No Imperial ship could land a hit on it. It was beyond anything Vorton had ever encountered. A perfect weapon, created not to conquer, but to send a message. The Empire was no longer the most powerful force in the galaxy. Humanity was. Vorton's mind raced. If he surrendered, he would be branded a coward. But if he stayed, they would all die. There was only one choice left. With a slow, bitter breath, he turned to his officers. All remaining ships, retreat. He had never spoken those words before. They tasted like ash in his mouth. The Empire's forces broke formation, fleeing the battlefield in desperation. Some ships tried to fight their way out, but they were cut down with brutal efficiency. Only those fast enough to escape the chaos managed to jump into hyperspace. As the flagship prepared to retreat, Vorton looked at the holoscreen one last time. Captain Carter was still watching him. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low. Carter's expression didn't change. "No, it's just beginning." And then, in a flash of light, the Empire's battered fleet vanished into the void, humiliated, broken, and carrying a single undeniable truth. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The retreating Imperial fleet limped through the void, their once mighty warships reduced to battered wrecks. Vorton sat in silence on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the damage reports scrolling across the holoscreen. Nearly 70% of his forces were gone, destroyed, disabled, or captured by the humans. It was a disaster unlike anything the Empire had ever suffered. His officers moved stiffly, the weight of failure hanging over them like a death sentence. No one dared to speak. No one wanted to be the one to break the silence. The Empire had never lost a battle like this, and yet, here they were, running like beaten animals. The communications officer hesitated before speaking. "Grand Admiral, High Command is demanding a full report and an explanation." Vorton exhaled slowly. There was no explanation, no excuse that would satisfy the Emperor. He had led an unstoppable armada to Earth's doorstep, expecting an easy victory. Instead, he had been handed a defeat so complete that it would shake the entire structure of the Empire. He forced himself to stand, straightening his uniform. His pride screamed at him to deny what had happened, to twist the truth. But he couldn't. The truth was burned into his mind. He had underestimated Earth, and now the Empire would pay the price. "Tell High Command I will give my report personally," he said at last. The officer nodded and relayed the message. A moment later, the main holoscreen flickered to life, and a massive figure appeared. Emperor Kale. His golden armor gleamed under the lights of the Imperial throne room, his crimson eyes burning with cold fury. The room behind him was silent, filled with the most powerful officials and military leaders in the Empire. They had all gathered to witness the report of the Empire's greatest military defeat. Vorton bowed his head slightly. "My Emperor." "Explain," Kale interrupted, his voice a deadly whisper. "Explain how the most powerful fleet in the galaxy was routed by a single human ship and a backwater world that should have fallen in a day." Vorton felt the shame like a blade in his gut. "We were deceived." A murmur spread through the throne room. No one had ever spoken such words in the Empire. The idea that their enemy had outwitted them was unthinkable. "They let us believe they were weak," Vorton continued. "They used our arrogance against us. The ship called the Revenant was unlike anything we have encountered. It moved faster than our sensors could track, its weapons were precise, and its defenses were impenetrable. We could not touch it." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "And the rest of their fleet?" Vorton swallowed. "They hid their true strength. They waited until we were overextended, then surrounded us. Their technology is advanced, beyond what we expected. But more than that, their tactics were brutal. They did not fight to defend. They fought to annihilate." Another murmur. Fear crept into the faces of some of the officials. The idea of an enemy more ruthless than the Empire itself was terrifying. For a long moment, the Emperor said nothing. Then, finally, he leaned forward. "You are telling me that humanity is a greater threat than we realized." Vorton nodded. "Yes, my Emperor." Kel's expression remained unreadable. Then, without warning, he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey worth hunting. "Good," he said. "Then we will treat them as such." The air in the throne room shifted. The murmur stopped. The officials stiffened. The Emperor's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Prepare the full might of the Empire." Vorton's breath caught. "My Emperor, if I may." "You may not." Kel cut him off. "This was not a war. It was a test. And now we will show them what true war means." The transmission cut. Vorton stood frozen. He had seen that look in the Emperor's eyes before. It was the look of a man who had decided to burn an entire world to the ground. And now, that world was Earth. You said, the war drums of the Empire had begun to beat. From every corner of Imperial space, fleets were being mobilized. Warships, battle cruisers, and dreadnoughts, each one a symbol of the Empire's dominance, began their march toward a single target, Earth. Vorton stood on the observation deck of the Imperial Command Station, watching the massive fleet assemble. Thousands of ships filled the void, their weapons primed, their engines burning with a singular purpose: vengeance. The Emperor had not hesitated. He had not wasted time on diplomacy or negotiation. In his mind, Earth had made a grave mistake by standing against the Empire. Now, they would be punished. A soft chime alerted Vorton to an incoming transmission. He turned, watching as the holoscreen flickered to life. Captain Relic, one of the most feared commanders in the Empire, appeared. His cold, reptilian eyes studied Vorton with amusement. "You look troubled, Grand Admiral," Relic said, "regretting your failure." Vorton kept his expression neutral. "I assume you receive your orders." Relic smirked. "Of course. The Emperor has granted me the honor of leading the first wave. I will personally ensure that Earth is reduced to ashes." Vorton's stomach twisted. He knew Relic's methods well. There would be no mercy, no restraint. Earth would not just be conquered, it would be erased. "They are not the weaklings we once believed," Vorton said carefully. "Their defenses are advanced. Their tactics are unpredictable. If you underestimate them, you will suffer the same fate as my fleet." Relic chuckled. "You let fear cloud your judgment, Vorton. You let their little trick shake you. But I am not so weak." He leaned closer, his eyes gleaming with confidence. "When I am finished, there will be nothing left of Earth but dust and echoes." The transmission cut. Vorton turned back to the viewport, watching the fleet's final preparations. Something deep inside him whispered that this was a mistake. The Emperor believed this was a simple war. Relic believed Earth was just another enemy to crush. But Vorton had seen the truth. Humanity did not fight for power. They did not fight for conquest. They fought for survival. And when a species fights for its survival, it will do anything to win. As the Imperial fleet began its jump to hyperspace, Vorton couldn't shake the feeling that they had just signed their own death sentence. You said, the Imperial fleet surged through hyperspace, an unstoppable wave of destruction headed straight for Earth. Thousands of warships, from towering dreadnoughts to swift interceptors, moved in perfect formation. Their mission was simple: total annihilation. On the bridge of his command ship, Captain Relic stood with a confident smirk, his eyes fixed on the countdown to arrival. He had waited for this moment, the chance to finish what Vorton had failed to do. To him, Earth was already dead. "Prepare weapons," he ordered. "As soon as we drop out of hyperspace, I want full bombardment. No warnings, no delays. We end this in a single strike." His officers nodded, eager to carry out the Emperor's wrath. The countdown reached 0. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect unison, right at the edge of Earth's solar system. And that was when everything went wrong. Alarms blared across the command ship as dozens of enemy signatures flooded their sensors. But these weren't Earth's outdated defense platforms or small planetary ships. No, this was something else. Something new. Ahead of them, a fleet of massive warships lay in wait. Sleek, dark, and bristling with weapons, they bore no markings of any known human faction. Their hulls seemed to drink in the surrounding light, and their formation was flawless, far too organized for an ambush. Relic's smirk faded. "What is this?" A communication link opened. A single human figure appeared on the main screen. A woman, clad in a black and silver uniform, her face calm, her eyes cold. "This is Admiral Helena Voss of the Revenant Fleet," she said. "You have entered human-controlled space. Surrender your forces or be destroyed." Laughter erupted across Rallick's bridge. "You think we fear you," he sneered. "We are the Empire. You will." The holoscreen cut off, and then the nightmare began. The Revenant fleet moved with terrifying speed. Their ships didn't charge forward like Imperial warships. They flickered, vanishing from one point in space and reappearing in another. It was like fighting ghosts. The first barrage came without warning. Blazing beams of energy cut through the Empire's frontline ships, slicing them apart like paper. Explosions ripped through the fleet as dozens of Imperial vessels were reduced to nothing in an instant. Rallick's ship shook violently as his shields took the impact. His eyes widened in shock. This isn't possible," he roared. "Return fire." The Empire's weapons lit up, but it was like trying to strike shadows. The Revenant ships weaved through the chaos, dodging every blast with ease. Their weapons never stopped firing. Ship after ship fell. Hundreds of thousands of Imperial soldiers died within minutes. Rallick gritted his teeth. All ships, retreat, retreat. But there was no escape. From the darkness of space, another wave of Revenant ships appeared, cutting off their exit. The Imperial fleet was trapped. On the bridge, Rallick felt something he had never felt before in his life. Fear. He turned to his communications officer. "Get me the Grand Admiral. Now." The officer hesitated. "Sir, Vorton is already watching." Rallick spun around, and there it was, the holoscreen, displaying the Imperial High Command. The Emperor himself watched the battle unfold in silence. The Revenant ships closed in. The fleet was being torn apart. Rallick's voice trembled. "My Emperor, we were wrong." The Emperor's face remained impassive. "Yes," he said, "you were." The transmission cut. Rallick barely had time to process what that meant before the final barrage came. A brilliant storm of energy washed over his ship. The last thing he saw was the command deck exploding around him. Then there was nothing. "You said." The wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifted through the void, shattered and lifeless. What was once a symbol of the Empire's might had been reduced to burning debris, scattered like dust among the stars. The Revenant fleet stood unchallenged, their ships unharmed, their formation unbroken. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Helena Voss watched the destruction with cold, calculating eyes. The battle had lasted less than 20 minutes. The Empire's most powerful warships, their legendary commanders, their fearless warriors, none of it had mattered. They had been unprepared, outmatched, crushed. A transmission request blinked on her console. She accepted it. Grand Admiral Vorton's face appeared, his expression grim. Unlike the arrogant fools who had led the charge, he had expected this outcome. Voss met his gaze. "Your fleet is gone. Your invasion is over." Vorton let out a slow breath. "What are you?" Voss tilted her head slightly. "Human." Vorton's eyes darkened. "No, humans should not have had this kind of power. We've monitored your species for centuries. You were advanced, yes, but not like this." A ghost of a smile crossed Voss's lips. "You were looking at the wrong humans." She gestured to the fleet around her. "Earth was never alone. We have been waiting, preparing for the day the Empire would overstep." Vorton's jaw tightened. "The Emperor will not accept this defeat." "No," Voss agreed. "He won't." She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "And that is his mistake." A moment of silence passed between them. Then Voss ended the transmission. She turned to her crew. "Send a message to Earth. The threat is neutralized. For now." The officers nodded, but the tension in the room did not fade. They all knew the truth. This was not the end. The Empire would not accept humiliation. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more desperation. But the Revenant fleet would be waiting. Voss looked out at the wreckage one last time. The Empire had demanded Earth's surrender. Earth had answered with war. And now, the galaxy would never be the same.